Welcome to Patent Pending. I'm your host, Gabriel Moncau. Today I am joined at the top right by Chase O'Brien, third time on the show, TSA co-president, and I've had to introduce him so many times I'm running out of things to say. At the bottom left, we have Alexis Bernstein, iconic broadcast anchor, longtime PCTV member, and my primary motivation to get good grades in Enviro. And at the bottom right, we have Gabrielle Khoriaty, PCTV scriptwriter and I think director, writer for The Crescent and Metal Northwestern Journalism Institute class of 2019. How are you guys today?
Sleepy.
I get that a lot, surprisingly. So we'll just jump into it, I guess. How did you guys sort of get started in the broadcast field? Like, how were the programs back then? What were you guys doing before all this? And how did everything sort of get started for you?
Well, for me, I was a new student at our school in 5th grade, and they have like a morning show that you can do every day, but my class had already done our time, but I only found out about it halfway through the year. And so I was given special permission to like do it with other classes, and the teacher at the time, Mr. Tyner, let me like create like little packages. And so I think my first story was about a duck named Oreo, and I did an investigative report on where he came from, which was the pond.
For me, I got started with this in 6th grade. So for me, I guess my motivation to do almost anything when I was growing up was based off of whatever my older sibling did. And I just kind of like copied that path for at least the very beginning of like through elementary school into the beginning of middle school. So even though my older sibling did not stick with the broadcast journalism and journalism in general, I did stick with it, but that's why I started it in the first place, was because I just sort of was like, okay, I guess this is what I'm going to do now.
And we were, choosing Alexis for middle school. There's a lot of stuff there. So one of the things was, I took art, and I'm like, I don't want to take art 5 days a week because I love art, but I'm like, I can't take 5 days a week of art. That's like too much art. So I'm like, I got to find something else to do. And then I'm like, oh, there's PCNN. I've always been, like a big tech guy, and I always like video editing. It's been one of those things that, I feel like it's just a useful skill to have and something everyone kind of wants to get good at. So I'm like, why not join? And at first it was just kind of a casual thing. And then, now I've been in the program going into my, 7th year in the program. And I've kind of been through the thick and thin of it all.
Yeah. I remember in 6th grade, I started with 2-day PCTV and the PCNN. And then the next week I switched to 3-day. And the week after I switched to 5-day.
Yeah, I stayed on 2-day all the way through middle school. When I got into high school, I ended up, sticking in PCTV and actually dropping art. Which, like I said, I would have kept both if my schedule had room, but I only had room for one. And, ultimately I felt like sticking with PCTV was the right decision. And I think I still agree with that.
Yeah, for me, I started with 3-day because I think on the Boca campus, 3-day was the minimum requirement of what you had to do. And then I went to 4-day, and I couldn't go to 5-day because on Tuesdays I had band, and obviously I couldn't just not go to band, but I always ended up going by the PCNN room after band being like, okay, what did I miss today?
I feel like a lot of people see the shows and the broadcast and they don't really understand how it's like structured behind the scenes. I mean, I didn't even know that there were days for this stuff until literally right now. So how does that sort of work on the back end?
Middle school is very differently
Yeah.
than high school. Like this is back in
Yeah.
middle school. In high school, it's a class just like any other class, so you're there 5 days a week.
So when it came to the actual middle school structure, then, since we're like still talking about the start, who was around? Like who taught this like wheel sort of thing sometimes of the week, and like who were there any other students that sort of are big names that stuck through it, for example, that people might recognize?
Mrs. Porter was my teacher throughout middle school, although she came in 7th grade.
Yeah, because she came my 6th
No,
grade
Miss Porter
year.
came in 8th.
Or
8th grade.
was it my 7th grade year? It was towards
She
the
came in
end.
8th.
I know because we.
A big issue in
Yeah.
middle school was there was a lot of turnaround with PCNN teachers, and they couldn't quite find what's a diplomatic way to say this, the right person for it. And so there was a lot of switching, and they eventually found Miss Porter, and we loved her. I love Miss Porter, and so she stuck with us throughout high school, and she's leaving this year while we're leaving. So
yeah. So on the Boca campus, my 6th and 7th grade year, I had Mr. now Dr. Svensson as my teacher, and he was great. He was amazing. But then my 8th grade year, he became more of just a math teacher, because at the time before he did math and the PCNN, and then 8th grade he went more to doing the math, and then they had a different teacher temporarily before Miss Porter ended up taking over on the Boca campus at the end of the year as well.
And how different was that middle school experience to what you guys have done now? Like, we've talked about it being a class rather than like certain days, but did you kind of do the same thing?
I mean, yes and no. So there was obviously a very different service structure, which they've even gone and changed. You know, the middle school program has gotten huge now to the point where they literally cannot fit all of the children inside of the studio some days. At least that's what I've heard. I haven't seen that for myself, thank God. But, you know, and I would say it was certainly more laid back. It was more open. So the middle school, we had shows, I believe it was once a month. You know, and in high school, there's a couple different, which, you know, I'm sure we'll touch upon later. There's kind of like 2 main groups in high school. In high school, runs their shows a little bit differently. But it was a little more casual. I guess there were some more like nonsensical pieces. And obviously like the production quality and standard was nowhere near as high as it is in high school, but that's, you know, kind of to be expected. We were still learning and growing. And I think there was a lot of room to learn and grow. But to that point, like, we always kept our cameras in autofocus. You know, none of it, when we were directing, we weren't really directing. We were just kind of following directions the same way, you know. Yeah, I guess that's that. I guess it was definitely a more toned down version, but I think it did a really good job of giving you that experience, because I know, you know, there definitely were people who did it like once or, you know, a year or two at the middle school level, kind of, you know, just to do something else. And they certainly walked away with, you know, at least some amount of knowledge in that area.
I have to say, I think the majority of my middle school PCNN class is still in the PCTV, like, second period class. Oh, Gabe, I don't know if you know this, like, second period PCTV is like the advanced class and like the people who work on the show. So there's different PCTV classes and like they do different things. I'm honestly not sure what the other periods do. Gabby,
the other, because I was in one of the other period when I, you know, my first year of high school, and it's just kind of more like project based, I guess. It's more like we're gonna learn, you know, this type of shooting, or this, you know, like this new way to edit, or we're gonna like teach you guys how to do invisible cuts, or that kind of thing. It is certainly, like I said, more of a novelty, and that, you know, the people who prove themselves get to move on up to period 2. And like I mentioned earlier, we're the ones who do. So high school, we do a weekly show every single Tuesday. And period 2 are the people behind that. And then there's also 1 or 2 extended shows, which is when everyone from all those other periods kind of puts their work together and creates a longer, usually about 30-minute show with a central theme or idea of some sort.
Yeah, so I know my brother is in one of the other class periods. He'll be in second period next year. He wanted to do second period this year, but he couldn't get it to work right with his schedule. So they do more, like in our class period, I feel like also we're always working on multiple different things at once. Like we'll be working on something for the show. We'll maybe be working on a project just for fun. And we'll also maybe be working on something for the PBS student reporting lab. Whereas I feel like for the other classes, from what I've seen my brother working on, it's not necessarily like all news packages. Like I think they do some more like creative style pieces throughout the year, because they're not working on producing those shows or the partnership with PBS. So they have a little bit more freedom to work on other things for their projects. Like they still have their assignments, but their projects might be like their assignments are a little more creative or out of the box type things that wouldn't air. But if there ever is something they produce that is really well done news style package, there are occasions where we do have stuff from the other class periods on the show.
Mm-hmm.
So on the topic of those periods, actually, that's quite interesting. Would you say that there's almost like a certain prestige to being in period 2 then? Like, do you have to like prove yourself to get in there or something? Or is it really just like, if it works for your schedule, you get into period 2?
Honestly, like I know there were a couple people who were in period 2 last year that didn't come back. It's just the amount of work that you want to put into it. If you don't feel like you want to work every single week on something that could potentially be new every single week, then like it's not like you don't have to do period 2 PCTV to like make an impact in PCTV under no circumstances. It's just for people who really want to continuously be making stuff and continuously working hard, because if you're not, then you fall behind in that class. Like if you can't keep up with the PBS assignments and the weekly PCTV and then your own personal stuff, like you're going to be overwhelmed. And that's the biggest difference between.
Yeah, it definitely takes a certain type of personality. It's not to say there aren't different levels within period, because there are definitely, like anything else, you have your go-getters who are all in, you have your normal people who have normal commitment levels, and you have who we like to dub the couch surfers, who like to kind of sit around on the couch and make that their pastime. But even then, I'd say even those people, they still have some, most of them still have some level of dedication that goes above and beyond normal. And I think it's also a case of, kind of what you want out of it as well. Obviously, if you want to do like I am, I'm not a big on-camera person. My love for broadcast and production comes from like editing and producing and writing scripts and, managing shows and all of that kind of stuff. So that's something I can really only do in this class period that I wouldn't really get the chance to either anywhere else.
So I think, at least in my opinion, a lot of it comes, like Alexis and Chase were saying, is from the drive for it and what you want to get out of it, because there's definitely different ability levels within the second period class. Like it's not all, oh, if you're the best, you're in second period, because I also know there's some really talented kids that aren't in the second period class. I think it all has to do with what you want to get out of it. Because also, like I was saying, how the other class periods might work on slightly more creative things sometimes. If that's something you're more interested in, you might choose not to be in second period because you want to produce some film stuff and some new stuff throughout the year. Like I think there's a little more freedom to do that in some of the other class periods.
So I think something else interesting that I also wanted to talk about, which actually came from the film show, they were talking a bit about PCTV at times, and they mentioned that they thought that in middle school, PCNN almost made people into what they deemed like little celebrities. Like it was kind of like a highlight thing. Like if you saw yourself on PCNN, it was like super cool. And like if they were shooting in your class, you'd be like, oh my gosh, I want to be on PCNN. Did you guys sort of feel that from backstage in PCNN? And how do you think that's changed going into PCTV?
I mean, for me in PCNN, if you talk to me like I know now throughout high school, like if you've watched PCTV, you see me on camera occasionally. In middle school, I was strictly, you cannot put me on camera. Like I used to, like, I think it was for one of our 8th grade shows, someone was like, I will pay you to be on camera. Like they just wanted to see me on camera. I was like, I'm not going to do it. I was like, if the zombie apocalypse happened and I was the only person left in PCNN, I would still not be on camera, which is just very different from how I am now I'm willing to do whatever, and I've gotten much more comfortable on the camera. But it's just, so for me it was like, oh, if I'm behind the scenes, no one even knows the effort that I'm putting into the shows and the broadcast, which I think was interesting because it just, a lot of that attention goes to whoever it was that was anchoring and on camera. But those, especially in middle school, in my opinion, were not the people doing the vast majority of the work in a lot of cases. Not necessarily all of them, like there were definitely some people that are exceptions to that, but that's just
definitely agree with that, because Gabby and I went through a very similar journey of behind the scenes to on camera. So like the biggest, Mason's gonna get a kick out of this, but the biggest person who influenced me to be on camera was Mason Berger. He's in the grade above us, and he's like the most incredible anchor. Shut up, Mason. But he like told me that I should try anchoring, and so I did it, and then I was like, okay, I like it, I guess. And then in sophomore year, my teachers didn't tell me until the day of that I would be anchoring for our like biggest competition. That's called STN. We do it every year. And they told me the day before that I would be anchoring with Mason for it. And like, I was so mad and I did a terrible job. And then it was bad. But anyway, I've gone on a big journey from behind the scenes to on camera. Like Gabby and I both in middle school, we had the same role as like producer / director of PCNN, and it's changed.
See, I'm in the magical transition of behind the scenes to, I think I want to stay behind the scenes. I have had exactly one major on-camera gig, and that was, I was literally the final anchor of the final show in 8th grade, and everyone's like, oh, you did a great job. I'm like, cool, I'm never doing that ever again. I don't know. It's just not my thing. It's not that I like can't speak or get nervous. just I've always found like more joy in being like the behind the scenes kind of tech guy, just because that's kind of the person I am. I don't know, and I feel like there are other people who can anchor better. Like I feel like I'm more worthwhile behind the scenes. The other thing you mentioned, I know we're talking a lot about ourselves and our journeys, but the way you phrased the question, the way I thought of it was the reaction of other people. Like when you walk, I don't know if you guys remember, but trying to film anything for PCNN when there are people around was one of the most irritating things you can imagine, because every time you walk by, somebody in the background is like, haha, I'm going to dab. Isn't that funny? Or like, I'm going to do this like weird hand signal or dance or wave at the camera or generally be annoying. And like, that was like really irritating. Especially when you go back and you'd have like a fantastic shot, a fantastic interview, and then somebody in the background is just kind of like bouncing up and down or whatever they're doing. I'd say in high school, most people have matured past that point. That's not to say it doesn't happen. We still do get shots ruined by people in the background being like, oh, look, it's the camera. Time to act stupid in front of the camera. Isn't it funny? I'm ruining the shot. But, most of that has died down, thankfully.
I think PCTV has helped me be more confident in telling people to get out of my shot when they're in it. Like, I'm not afraid to stop an interview and be like, excuse me, you need to leave. And like, it's okay if people don't like me for it. Like, I will get the shot.
Definitely agree with Alexis on that. In fact, like if I'm trying to film something now, like in high school, like the way I am, if someone was in the background, like acting stupid, I definitely wouldn't just be like, okay, I guess there's going to be someone acting stupid in the back of my shot. And I think for the most part, like, especially in like even the older grades of middle school, I wouldn't have stood for that either. But in like the younger grades, like in 6th grade or something, if there was like an 8th grader acting like stupid in the back of my shot, there was no chance I was saying anything. I'd just be like, guess I'm gonna have someone acting stupid in the back of my shot. But I think a lot of like, I've gotten definitely a lot of confidence from even just being able to go places and be there with the camera, because sometimes with the camera you feel like you're like in the way, like when you have the whole tripod set up and everything, you're like, sorry, I'm here but I have to be doing this. And I think I've definitely gotten a lot of confidence from that. And also like, I'm just thinking, like there was this one time earlier this year where Ryan Dudak and I were filming outside of school at Boston Bagel, and we were interviewing this woman who works there because we were doing a story on restaurants outside of campus. And then this woman comes in and starts yelling at Ryan, me, and the woman we were interviewing from the store about how we were blocking the store and how she couldn't get her coffee and we were being such nuisances. And I could just picture, like, if it was, like, 6th grade me and someone started doing that, I would have, like, started crying. Like, I would have been like, oh, my God. But then I was just, like, Ryan and I were just, like, okay. Like, I'm sorry.
You mentioned, like, being kind of a hidden person in locations. And I think that's one of the most difficult things about, like, being on location for something is that you're supposed to be, like, this eye that's showing viewers into something, but when you bring out a camera anywhere, like I did a thing at the Miami Book Fair, as soon as you bring out a tripod, everyone immediately looks your way because they want to be seen on camera, even if they don't know what it's for. If there's a camera, they're like, I need to be in that. And so it's really hard in public places to like get a shot where no one is staring at the camera and everyone is just acting natural.
Yeah, no, the first thing I always do whenever I go on a shoot is I tell whoever I'm talking to, okay, rule number 1, the camera does not exist. You do not acknowledge the existence of the camera. You do not look at the camera. You do not even think about the camera. For all you're concerned, there is no camera. And that can be really hard for some people to get sometimes. Like I said, especially, it's maybe easier if you're like shooting B-roll one-on-one with somebody, but if you're like, if you're in a public place, like, you basically just have to hope you can get that camera set up in about 30 seconds and you got basically one shot. Because then, like I said, everyone just kind of like, ooh, what's the camera for? Even if they're not trying to ruin your shot, there's a very good chance that they could end up doing that.
It's usually just nice people. They're just like, what are you shooting? You're like, please don't talk to me.
I think there's also sometimes the flip side of that is you definitely get the people that are like, see a camera and are like, ooh, my time to shine. And then you get the people that like, you won't even be filming them or anything that has to do with them. And they'll come to you and be like, I wasn't in that, right? Like, you don't have me there, right? Like, I'm not in the shot. I'm like, it's good. It's okay.
Yeah, I think
definitely the two sides to that.
then to compare like getting B-roll in public, and then I know, one of the great mistakes of my career is going out with very few interviews scheduled and trying to pull people off the street for interviews. And all I will say is like it just does not work well. You end up getting characters. Is that the right word? I think that's the right word. Let's just go with characters. Yeah, I don't even know. Like I said, I've never really had anything bad like that, but I've seen some of the stuff people have come back with, and I'm like, there are people who like said this in front of a camera, like on their own will.
The guy in New York.
What'd you say, Alexis?
Do you remember the guy we were emailing about his art in New York?
Yes. There's definitely, I definitely feel like after so many years of doing this, I definitely have some stories. Like when Chase was saying like the weird things people say sometimes when you have a camera, it reminded me of this one time during freshman year for STN practice day. I was out shooting in Lauderdale by the Sea with Ryan Dudak and Mason Berger. And then this one guy comes up and asks us if we're a part of the left-wing media propaganda. Like he was like, are you part of like the left-wing propaganda? And we're like 15 and 16 and they're like, please stop.
You should have said yes.
It was like me and Ryan Dudak as like tiny freshmen, and then Mason was a sophomore. Like we were all just kind of like, hey.
Yeah. And then you also get, I guess in the vein of strange occurrences, I guess one of the most annoying things to deal with, kind of a separate topic, but still related, is stories falling through. And sometimes you can see it coming, and then other times, I'm sure Ryan will remember, there was a story we were trying to get on this year, where we were doing, I believe we were going to cover like a facility that helped like children with like mental health disabilities, and that kind of stuff. And like the person we were emailing was like super enthusiastic. She loved the idea. And then she just ghosted us.
Like just that was really frustrating. So Chase, Ryan, and I were working on this story, and we were reaching out to this. I don't remember exactly what the organization was, but it was like a school.
Oh.
And the woman seemed so excited. She was like, "Yes, I'd love to have you come." And I was like, "Okay, cool. Like this is what we would need to do. When would be a good time?" And I got no response. And then I emailed back again, no response. And she went from so excited to not responding, and it was just kind of like, okay, then guess time to move on to something else.
I emailed a woman she ended up emailing me back 4 months. Okay, I emailed a woman. We were going back and forth for days and like super fast responses immediately. And then I said, okay, great. What time works for you? And she didn't respond for 4 months. And then she did. And I interviewed her and she was phenomenal. Loved her. She was so sweet. But I was like, she emailed me. She was like, oh, sure, I can do this time. And I was like, you
like how does it even happen? Was that like you just like put it on your to-do list and forget about it, and then 4 months later you're like, oh right, the broadcast girl.
And she didn't say like, oh sorry, I've been away. She didn't say any of that. She was just like, great, I can do this time. And I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah. I think sometimes people like the idea of having like us come in and do a story on them more in a theoretical sense, and then once you get to like, okay, when works, and they're like, oh wait, you mean you really want to come like with a camera? Never mind. And I don't know, I just feel like sometimes that's hard because it's like they like you coming in a theoretical sense, but then it's like, oh yeah, I would need to interview you and you would need to be on camera. They're like, oh, never mind.
They like the idea, it's like I said, I mentioned this kind of in the TSA, like they like the idea of the publicity but don't want to have to do the work, air quotes work, that goes along with it, which really is not a lot for them. But I certainly, had sort like even inside of school where you like get stuff set up and the person's just kind of like, and you're like, really? Like, can you just told me that at the start and not like have to waste my time?
Which I also think is really interesting. The difference between like broadcast and print journalism is the fact that I found typically if I'm doing a story for print journalism, I end up with a lot less of people being like, oh no, I don't want to do it for you, because they're like, oh, I won't, like my face won't be anywhere. Okay, like you can use my name, you can use my quotes as long as my face isn't there. And it's like, okay, which is just interesting to see how it's like the different media outlets, you definitely run into different problems as far as cooperation and people willing to help out.
Certainly sounds like you guys have a very different experience to what I think most people looking into PCTV might think that it is. There's a few more troubles that might have been unexpected. But I also wanted to pivot a little bit and just talk about one more thing regarding the difference from middle school and high school, which is I think that the film people mentioned this briefly. There's a bit of a different structure to the shows, right? In terms of like actual content and length and stuff like that. And something that they mentioned, which I will bring up that you guys can give your opinions on, was that they thought that having shorter shows gave a lot less room for interesting content, and that made the shows less prestigious or less interesting to the audience, or maybe got less people interested, things like that.
Well, here's what I can say to that, because I know also middle school operated very differently on the Boca campus from the Fort Lauderdale campus. So on the Boca campus, we had weekly shows in middle school every Friday, and they were long shows. But the thing is, the majority of our content was produced by people who were in the film wheel class or the broadcast wheel class, because we had those as extracurriculars, and then we also had them as wheel classes on the Boca campus. So the thing is with that, it was kind of just an opportunity for those who were in the wheel class to sort of showcase what they had done. But, and it took a lot of time, because especially if you're looking at short films, there was always like 6 or 7 groups in each class. And even though not necessarily every one of them would air, it took up significant time. But it also meant that it was sometimes like when Chase was saying earlier about like the content being like silly and stuff, it was definitely more of the, okay, yeah, you're going to get someone dabbing in the background, like you're going to get someone just being a goofball on the camera. And I think that is a big portion of, that is the reason why we were able to have weekly shows on the Boca campus in middle school, is because of we had that content. But then as far as the content that was being produced by the people who were involved in PCNN, it was, a lot of it was, there's much more self-accountability in the high school than there is at the middle school level. I know because our shows were on Friday, a lot of the time, Thursday after school was over, everyone would be like, okay, yeah, I'm leaving. And it'd be, but you said your piece would be done. Oh yeah, it's not done. And then I would go through and like, to the best of my ability, sometimes I finished up 5 different pieces for the show, so it would air. And so in high school, you have that level of self-accountability. But yes, I mean, there's a lot less creative because there's no film in the high school in the shows, which maybe makes it less interesting to the viewer, but that's not necessarily the right outlet for those creative, more abstract pieces. Because PCTV, while there is creative aspects to it, it's more focused on the news and what's going on.
Like, film now does like real films, like long length like that. We don't have time to air on a 5-minute show. And so like I'd say the film kids objectively are funnier than the PCTV kids, like just as a whole. And so like every time we try to think of like a funny piece for PCTV, there's like 2 people who are able to do it. It's like Ari Burns, or who else does the funny things?
Not me. Whenever something funny comes up,
neither one of us.
Ryan will usually look at me and be like, "Do we want to do that?"
Either of you. Like, I'm not in that boat either.
No,
it's none of us.
Like, we're not funny. Like Ryan and I always go, "Yeah, no, we can't be funny." So it's like the thing is that we're not the film, and I mean we do only have 5-minute shows, so we can't show the school news, keep them updated, all the stuff we're producing, and then also have a 10-minute long film. That the time constraint doesn't work for that.
The other time thing too is we've learned, like as you get better at broadcast, you kind of tighten your scope. Like there have been, for middle school, the general rule was kind of, if you took a piece off the drawing board, it might take you a month to get there, but it usually ends up on the show. Whereas high school, like you hold yourself to a much higher standard. I've pretty much everyone in period 2 at some point this year dropped a piece, whether that was, before they started shooting, or there are some people I know who made it all the way to the end and basically canceled the piece the day before the show because they didn't like it, or it wasn't interesting enough, or it just didn't turn out right. The other thing too is, we made a lot of stuff shorter. It's a lot more condensed, should I say, which, maybe leaves you a little less room to breathe, but it's not unnecessarily long. Like I guarantee if I looked back at some of like my news packages from middle school, I could probably make them about half their length. That's another thing you kind of pick up in high school, is how to be concise with your journalism. Give what is needed, and not too much more, because you don't want to, bore your viewer. You don't want to take, time away from them. And like I said, like Gabby said, it makes sense that the film kids kind of have that view, because they do tend to be a little more creative. And I agree, PCNN was a little bit more of a creative outlet than PCTV is. But if we're going, by it's like the industry terms, this is far closer to what like an actual news show would look like, even if it is a little more quote unquote boring. I don't find it boring. I find it interesting. But if you're, if that's not if like the news is not your thing, if you don't like, learning about people and that kind of stuff. And I do agree there are, we like to joke that like when we get desperate, we go to the calendar. It's like the musical is coming up, so we do the musical piece, and that's something that we've definitely been trying to stay away from. I think we're really, this year I'd say people really kind of got back into the show, because we kind of changed up our identity a little bit. We made it a little more laid back, made it a little bit more fun. It wasn't maybe the total overhaul that we wanted, but I think I know there were a lot more people this year who were seeing the show in a lot more positive light, and I think the content we were producing got better this year, and we were much better about getting some kind of a variety in rather than having a show where it's like, oh, this is just kind of all the same stuff in different forms.
I think, like, I don't know, a lot of people don't know this, but at the beginning of the year, we had, for the first month of school, we just had meeting after meeting on how we could make our show more interactive with the students. And I like to feel we accomplished that, because almost every show we have click here to vote, or here's Ari doing something funny. I think it's more engaging than years previous, because we purposely made it more engaging, because we realized people were getting bored with package after package. But a lot of the kids in period 2 really enjoy making package after package. I personally love making packages, and most of mine are pretty serious. Before school ended, I was working on this thing about the foster care system, and before that I did something on this these young women with disabilities. And so a lot of us like making serious stuff to prepare us for the future, and just because we enjoy making it. But for kids who are in the second period piece of TV that's airing, not a lot of them, but some of them want to go into journalism in the future, and game shows aren't really a part of broadcast TV news. And so
definitely how I think. Okay, I don't want to interrupt you, Alexis, if you're still going.
No, it's okay. I'm really bad at, contrary to what I do on camera, I'm really bad at speaking without a script. I'm good at anchoring because I can read it, but I'm not good at just talking.
Yeah, so I think for me, I love making packages, and because I'd say my favorite stories that I've done are about things that happen outside of school, different organizations, different events, different charities. And I think the thing is a lot of that doesn't end up airing because it doesn't really make sense to the same reason we don't have films on PCTV is the same reason why some of the packages I've made haven't aired, is they just aren't really applicable to what the school wants to see, what the student body needs to see. But I think that's also the same reason as to why we have packages on the musical or the play or the football team or whatever that is, because that's what's happening at the school. And even though we do talk about things that are happening outside of school, a group of girls in second period this year did this great package on Tomorrow's Rainbow that aired on the show, but also and I think that's kind of what PCTV is used for, is to sort of show what's happening in the school and also a little bit of things that are going around in our greater community, which I think is really important. I think it's the same reason why some people don't want to watch the news, because it's not interesting or it's not fun per se, but it's important. At least that's my take on it, is I know not everyone our age is watching the news or reading the news, but in my opinion, it's important. That's how we become well-informed citizens of the country, citizens of our community, is by reading and watching about what's happening around us. And I think the same goes for being a part of the Pinecrest community. I think it's important to know what your peers are doing, kind of how here you're taking your platform here and focusing on different activities to learn more about what it is that different aspects of your peers are doing. And I think the same thing goes for PCTV, is you don't need to see the same people week after week being goofballs or being on a game show or something. You need to see different aspects of the community. And I think that's, at least in my head, what my goal is in typical producing a show.
So something else that I think is definitely interesting is that you guys have been through this program for a long time now. How do you think you've seen it change? Because a lot of these people that I've talked to, I'll give the TSA example. There was like a clear turning point in TSA when the fashion team won nationals. Things sort of got really big. There was a lot more interest. There was a lot more funding. There was a lot more, like, the public perception changed significantly. Do you feel like the program has changed a lot in your time in it, whether the way that people see it or your experience?
I feel like it has changed a lot, but I feel like the biggest changes happened a little bit just before us, like when the high school studio was built, which was like a little bit before like our time, I guess. I feel like that's
I want to say it was in
when
like
the biggest
2014 or
changes
something.
were. But for us also, the second period class has had some major changes. Alexis and I were both in the original second period class, which started sophomore year. And for us, so that was 2 years ago. And it was a very, very different atmosphere. It was a lot of us just working, like, we were turning like piece after piece after piece, and they weren't the quality that we wanted because we were just working on getting shows on the air, because there were like 10 kids in the class, maybe not, I don't even remember if there was that. And there was like maybe 5 or 6 of us that took it seriously. And so I know sophomore year, there's nothing that, like, junior year and senior year both, I have packages that I can say I am proud of what I accomplished there, and that package in its entirety. Sophomore year, we were just trying to get the show on the air. So we were like, okay, we're just going to turn this, like, this is basic, this is not great, but it's got to get on the air. We have to have a show if we want to keep having shows. And then last year, junior year, was when the second period class, like, I'd say like it doubled or tripled in size. And then we had groups and different people producing shows for different weeks. So we had the time to do more longer form stuff that took us more time, because we weren't just growing stuff in a timeline to push stuff on the air. And then this year also, there's been, okay, so we found something that worked last year. What can we do to make it better this year, to have fun with it, to become interactive with the community, and to sort of just take it to the next level from there?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm going to be a little biased here because, I'm obviously in TSA. So I'd say it's the shift that I've seen is certainly nothing as radical as that. I'd have to agree with Gabby and say if there was a big turning point, it was a few years before we got here, which was when they redid the upper school. We got a brand new, fantastic studio. We still have it today, and it is incredible. I mean, it is. I don't know if you've got the, actually, you have, of course, you got the chance to see your film, but it is like absolutely ridiculous. I don't think we even do, a fraction of the things that we could probably do with that studio and that setup. We do a lot with it, but we could certainly do a lot more. But at least, for me, I feel like a lot of the changes just come, with age, kind of as I've gotten older and gotten more into it. I've grown more experience. I've seen the program grow. Like I said, I didn't get to see that second period jump. I joined my sophomore year of Chicago the earliest I could. And they said that was the year the class kind of took off and gained kind of a new identity. And honestly, I'd have to say it's a little hard to tell because, again, I really don't know what high school was like before I was there. This is PCTV has been around and PCNN have been around for a long time. So I certainly believe, I think they've seen much more of a change, but I can't really speak to that personally.
Something, oh, sorry, did you want to say something, Gabby?
I was just gonna, because I was just keep thinking as we're talking, the biggest change has been the jump in second period. I mean, prior to Alexis and I, prior to our sophomore year, there was no second period class producing the shows. So it was just kind of what pieces were produced throughout different class periods. But then sophomore year, we had the second period class producing the shows, but it was a lot. I don't want to call it basic, or I don't know. I guess the two terms that come to my mind are basic and hot mess. Of us just being we got to air something, we got to have it out there. And then I think us setting that precedent sophomore year of having shows every week, having that class period dedicated to it, is what brought in people like Chase the next year to be okay, I want to help with this. How can I do that? And that just made it so the shows, the quality, the community outreach aspects of it could increase in quality so greatly.
And
that makes sense. I'm starting to ramble.
Someone mentioned earlier how we'll cut pieces the day of the show because they're not quality. We're able to do that now, whereas in sophomore year, just if it filled up time, you were on the show basically. And anything that was relevant to Pinecrest, you're in it. It doesn't matter how bad the audio is or how shaky your interview is. If it is something, it was on it. And now, like, I remember this year, like, someone just had an interview and there was just too much, like, noise in it. And someone was like, why did you correct this? And they were like, oh, I didn't notice. And they were like, you know what? It's not airing. Go edit it. Maybe it'll air next time. And they just, like, it was, like, the day of the show. And we were just like, it's gone. It's done. It's bye.
I mean, I think there was a week, we canceled an entire show one week because we were so dissatisfied with the content. Not our proudest moment, but I'll admit, like, it does happen, you know, which that was fun trying to explain that one away. But like I said, Alexis said, we do have that luxury because we have so many people. We have so many people always working, you know, always trying to produce some new and interesting content. And we know to be flexible in that aspect. There's a lot of times where we'll just be like, okay, like there's a lot of, like, if you finish your piece early, like if we have extra time, we'll air it on this show. If not, we'll air it on the next show. You know, so I'd say there's certainly variety in that aspect. There's like what we call like our evergreen pieces, which are the kind of we have them produced with this show in mind, but if something happens, something more important comes up that needs to get on that show, or there's an earlier show that kind of loses a story or something that can go anywhere. And then obviously the thing we're more keen on getting in are your time-sensitive pieces. Obviously, it doesn't make sense to air a piece about the musical a month after the musical. So those are the kind of things that we're a little more focused on getting in, you know, on the show, that they kind of need to be there.
So I think I've mentioned film a few times now, but I do think that it's worth talking about. When I was talking to the film kids, halfway through I sort of stopped and I looked back, and it almost felt like a PCTV broadcast episode because they were talking as much about film as they had talked about PCTV. A lot of them had been in PCTV or PCNN before, and they expressed that they felt like those programs almost worked as like a feeder system. Like a lot of kids from film came first from PCTV and PCNN. And yet here we haven't really had to talk as much about film. So how different do you think the programs are, and like what's their relationship there really?
I mean, I think a lot of, at least from what I know of the film kids, obviously I'm not out of the film program, is in PCNN, it was kind of like, it was on the Boca campus, there was the film wheel class, there was the broadcast wheel class, but then whichever one it was you wanted to do really after, like during that study hall period where you could do extracurriculars, was just one class. So it was learning all the camera skills, learning how to edit was all kind of that one starting point. And also, if you look at like what the courses are technically called, other than the second period class, it's called like media, it like has film, it's just kind of like media production. I don't remember exactly what they call it on like the course selection, but it involves film. Like the classes that freshmen are allowed to take, they have a film aspect to it. Like you're allowed to produce, like it takes, like not in the second period class, we don't produce any films, but in the other class periods, they can produce a film during the year if they want to. And so I think it's that of getting the foundations for broadcast and the foundations for film as far as camera skills, editing, learning how to use mics, learning how to focus like a camera, learning those different skills start in the same place.
And like, I think the reason a lot of film kids start off as PCTV kids is because, I don't know about Boca, but in middle school, we only had PCNN. There was no like separate thing, unless I'm remembering wrong, but
no,
I don't
there was nothing else. That's all it was.
And so like, if you like felt that you didn't want to do broadcast TV, but you still wanted to like make something with video, that was your only option. And so I guess if you like go to high school, you would just go to like what you know. But I think the biggest difference is film kids are just more creative in the sense that like they can come up with a story and like make it come alive on screen. And like I have no idea how to do that. I couldn't like come up with a plot and write it. Like I used to have a free period during one of the film classes, and I would just do my work in the studio because I just like the vibe of the studio. And so I would hear like their meetings, and it's so different. You guys spend so long on like one film, and that amazes me. And then they turn out like such good quality. And so I think if you were a film kid and started in PCTV, you might not like the fast paced, like we need a story in the musical's in 1 week, so you need to have it by 3 days from now. And so if you like, it's just a different way of production.
That's why they wanted longer PCTV shows.
Yeah, probably.
I was going to say,
the thing is administration giving us 5 minutes a week is already like they're happy to give it to us, but they definitely, except for the occasional longer show, are not going to give us more time. But that's also why I feel like what Alexis was saying about how the film kids spend so long on one film, whereas broadcast was more fast paced, is the same reason. Obviously, no one went this year because of the coronavirus canceling the trip, but with STN, it was going to have a more broadcast focus as far as what Pinecrest students were going this year, because in broadcast journalism in the real world, you have that fast turnaround. You have, okay, this event happened, we need it covered. Like, an event happens in the morning, it needs to be covered in the news that night. Whereas for a films have, like, people spend months, years, forever working on films and producing that. So it's more of a detail oriented, I guess, for a lot of films, as far as making sure everything is perfection. Whereas for broadcast journalism, it's obviously you want it perfect, and ideally it would be perfect, but sometimes it is. Something might be a little rough, but you got to get it on the air because people have to be informed about it.
Yeah. I feel like there's also a difference, I guess, like I said, like the fast pace and unscripted nature of broadcast. You have to be a little more reactive, a little more willing to kind of put yourself out there and deal with situations that you don't exactly get control. When you go to an interview, you have a questions list, but you could end up asking the first question and then having to throw everything else in the trash because it goes in a completely different direction. Same thing when you start editing a piece. You could have, there's a lot of times where I've like come up with a piece. I'm like, okay, here's what I want the piece to be. I shoot it, I go to edit it, and I'm like, all right, it's the same person, it's the same topic, but this is a totally different piece from the one I planned in my head. The other thing too that we haven't talked about that is definitely important is the team size. Obviously in film, like, yes, you can make 1 or 2 man films, but it is much harder to do. Whereas in broadcast, you rarely ever work in a team of more than like 3 people. And even then, everyone is pretty versatile. Obviously, everyone has their specialties. People prefer to anchor, people prefer to produce, people prefer to do camera work, people prefer to edit. But I say in broadcast, everyone can kind of do everything. Like, if you need to, like if somebody's like, oh crap, I need someone to edit this, you'd be like, I'm not the greatest editor, but I can still help you out. Whereas in film, it's a lot more specialized. Not that there aren't, multifaceted people in film, but you definitely have your people who are, I'd say much more experienced with camera work. You have your people who, in like the real world deal exclusively with editing. All your, light and sound people, which is something else that broadcast, like that's all done, kind of by a single person in broadcast.
Gabe, you're probably the best to talk about this because we're not film people.
My film experience
we're just going off observations.
My film experience is limited, but I think that there's, I don't know. I feel like film is just run differently. Like it's the people have very similar backgrounds in terms of technical skills. Like I feel like people might be able to jump around between these things fairly easily, but it's a very different focus. It's a lot more. It's basically what you said, really, Lexi. It's really about. It's like one project. You're creating one thing. It's a lot less about you have this deadline or you have this thing that you want to put out. It's a lot more creative in that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for broadcast, I'd say 99% of the pieces I've created since 8th grade when Ryan joined PCNN was every single piece. It was me and Ryan working together, except there's been a couple where I feel like Alexis has worked with us and a couple where Chase has worked with us. But for the most part, it was like the 2 of us. We would like especially by now, like the end of high school, like it's kind of sad that I'm never going to work with her on any of this again because like we really sort of figured out, I guess, like the rhythm of what worked for us is like, okay, like you're better at this, I'm better at that. But like if for some reason Ryan couldn't make it to a shoot, she knew I could still take care of whatever it was that she would have been doing if she was there, like vice versa. Like if I couldn't make it, I know typically when we were doing an interview, I'd handle more of like the asking of the questions and like the flow of that, and she'd handle more of like the camera. But then like we'd check each other. Like at the end of the interview, I'd always say to Ryan, like, do you have anything you want to ask? And she'd ask a couple more questions. And once the shot was set up, Ryan would set it up, but then maybe I'd fix it in the slightest bit. Like we really just worked well together, I guess. And as far as like knowing what each one of us was better at, but all could take care of whatever else needed to be done if the other person couldn't handle something for some other reason.
I generally like to mostly ride solo in broadcast. That's mainly just because I have like trust issues in the sense where if I'm like, okay, this thing needs to be edited by this space. Like if I give it to myself, like I know it'll get done. That's not to say I don't trust people, but like, I don't know, at least in my head, like I always kind of want to be the person to have like the last say. Like anytime we do, I don't think there's been a single team I've worked in where I've not edited, the master cut or most of the thing. That's just kind of the way I work. And that's, again, especially because that is kind of where my passion lies. I generally like people having me help me out on shoots, especially because there's one interview I did this year which looked absolutely phenomenal. I think was the best piece I produced this year. But the problem was because I was shooting the entire thing solo. Not my fault. My Nelly was supposed to shoot with me, and she ended up going home sick literally like 10 minutes before the interview. Was that my subject ended up drifting slightly off the side of the camera at the end. So I lost about one good bite at the end, which was very agonizing and resulted in me doing some strange cuts to get her for like the 3 seconds. She kind of swayed back into the frame. But like I said, other than that, like I said, certainly planning and contacting people. I like having help with that. I suck at contacting people. I don't know what it is, but like I just do not have the ability to like reach out and like set stuff up. If you give me a time and a date, I'll show up. I'll do whatever. But I'm really bad at getting that all set up. But kind of once the shoots are all said and done, I kind of like. It's kind of nice, like having knowing that you don't have to really rely upon anyone else. It's not like if you're in film and you're like, oh great, like I really hope that my audio guy is able to send me, all the sound he recorded. Because otherwise this isn't going to work. I feel like it's kind of nice to know that you're kind of in control of pretty much everything.
I also only work alone basically because it's the same reasons, but I'm a perfectionist, and I think that gets on people's nerves, and I don't really care if it gets on people's nerves if it's perfect. And so I think I think it's hard to work with me sometimes because I will be over your shoulder trying to do everything. And so it's just better for me to work alone. If I don't really know where I'm going though, I'll ask if one of my teachers will come on the shoot with me. Like I know Mr. Burgess loves going on shoots with me. And Miss Porter likes going on them with me. And so sometimes I'll bring a teacher along just so that I'm not like alone in 5 foot in a random place I've never been to. But like typically I go alone and I shoot, edit, write all by myself. And I much prefer it that way just because other people are like a lot sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, me and Ryan, I guess because we've been working on basically everything together for like 5 years. Like I feel like if there was like, even though obviously like I trust Alexis, I trust Chase, like if for some reason like I was working with one of them, I feel like I'd definitely be more like, okay, I want to see like the final product before it's done. Whereas with Ryan, I'm like, yeah, you export it when you're done. Like it's good. Like, I don't know. I just feel like because we've worked on literally basically every story that we've done for the last 5 years is like, I don't know. I just think Ryan and I like have developed like that like trust and like working together well, which is why I don't know. It's just like really sad that like we're done. We never got like a final piece of any sort. Just okay, but I don't know.
So I think something that I've noticed while doing this podcast, while talking to a lot of other people as well, which I think is worth mentioning, is that a lot of the different departments, a lot of people, whether it be arts or TSA or robotics or film, they all express how they think people in other departments are really talented and could benefit what they do, but that there's not very much overlap in like people working between departments. The film people said that they thought that they could benefit a lot from talking to, for example, the art department about getting like props or something like that, or something special set up, but that there isn't very much overlap there. How do you guys feel like that works with your area? Do you know that there's something
I mean, I definitely think that it's interesting because at least the way I've sort of felt things, if it's, let's say it's another activity I'm involved in, I see the way they complement each other, and like maybe I'll use some of the skills or some of the resources I have from one to like work with the other. Like this year when I joined the yearbook staff, it was kind of me seeing more of like that side of things. And there's definitely aspects of one that I've utilized in the other. And it's just before this year, I wouldn't have necessarily thought that way or to do something. Like there was one time I needed a picture of something for a story for PCTV, and I knew where that yearbook had gotten at that picture. So I asked in yearbook if I could use that in my story, and they're like, yeah, of course. And it's just like things overlap in ways like sometimes I feel like the same way we were saying, like I work really well with Ryan, but like wouldn't necessarily trust anyone else, or like we work well by ourselves. And sometimes it's hard to like ask for help from that other department or ask for help from that other thing unless like you know how to do it yourself.
At the beginning of this year, we were thinking we like had a conversation about how we can involve other departments, and so I asked the art department if they'd make a new PCTV backdrop from us, and then we had like a contest with the upper school on which one would win. And like, well, in theory, it sounds like an easy thing to do. It took so much back and forth with the art department, and like the biggest person I talked to was Mr. Ligori, and I love Mr. Ligori. I sit in his class almost every day, like just to do work because I love the general atmosphere of his classroom. But it's awkward to ask a teacher for a favor when like you're it's like I'm a student and he's a teacher. Like I can't be like, hey, I want you to ask your students to do a new assignment for me because that's what I want, you know? And so like it worked out because Mr. Ligori is a lovely person and so helpful. But if it's a teacher I didn't know personally, I feel like I'd be very awkward asking like, I don't know, what's a teacher I don't know. If I asked like someone in the music department to write us a new intro song, you know? Like it's a lot of work, and it's hard to ask people to do that because you don't know if they're gonna want to. But
I think it's also hard because obviously, you know, this is something I noticed in the art when we had that contest is that, you know, obviously we care a lot, but not everyone else necessarily does. Like I know there are a lot of people who just like took a piece of art they made, slapped the PCTV logo on it, and called it a day. Some of them were beautiful pieces of art, but that didn't change the fact that they just took a piece of art they made and slapped the logo on it. We actually ended up with like a cool background.
Yeah, I love our background.
But there were only, like I said, there were only like maybe 10 or so submissions that were like even considered, because I felt like a lot of them were rushed or, you know, like I said, basically non-submissions, which was like irritating, but also understandable at the same time. You know, the same way, like if I was.
If someone asked us to do something for them and we didn't like if the Spanish department was like, I want you guys to make an instructional video because you guys have cameras on how to speak Spanish, I would be like, okay.
Right.
And then
yeah, I mean,
bad.
I mean, like on that, like kind of how Alexis was saying, like if like a different department wanted something, like maybe we'd do it, but like it wouldn't be like super like, yes, I want to do this. I think that's also like kind of how I felt with like sometimes projects that involve cameras and videos in other classes is it's definitely like I'll put something together and be like, well, I'd never turn this in to Miss Rashbaum and Miss Porter for PCTV, but it's good enough for a class project, just because it's like sometimes I feel like the responsibility, like how like we're saying, like sometimes it's hard to ask for help because you don't know if someone else wants to do it. It's like also because we know sometimes we don't want to do it, like when someone expects us to do something because we know how to do the video.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I guess in that sense it has. Which I'm going to come back to the cross-department stuff in a minute, you know, just because I can speak a lot about that, having done film stuff in TSA, but for a second, going to the whole class project thing, it does make you a little more cynical, I would say. Like, there are a lot of times we're watching videos and I'm like, ooh, you filmed that vertically? Like, come on. Or like, you thought that edit looked appropriate. Yeah, vertical video, that is...
vertical video, whenever there's a class video project and like we're watching the different like submissions and there's vertical video, it's like a little part of me dies because it's like if you had just turned your phone, we would be able to, it'd be so much better.
iPhone cameras are pretty decent. Like
no, honestly, anything after I'd say like iPhone 8 and up is like basically almost as good as our camera. Now you're not gonna get like your beautiful, you know, focus, you know, we can focus and blur that we can get on interviews. For like general purpose stuff, they work pretty well. And then I guess the other thing too is like lighting as well. I've noticed like a lot of shots with bad lighting where people are talking, like you can't see half their face. Or I don't know. Actually, I'm actually surprised by how good most people are like just editing with iMovie. Like I haven't like I said, lighting and like vertical video are big things, but I haven't noticed any like
professional software for a school project, you know?
No, I know what I'm saying, but I'm saying like the editing level is generally like not that bad in your typical school projects.
Yeah,
Sorry to break it to you guys, but I'm not going to run color correction on this.
Yeah, no. All right, listen, man. I'm not that insane.
No, with video and school projects, it's always interesting because there's only in my like entire time in high school, there's only been one project that's been a video project, and I didn't feel like the brunt of the work was like given to me, and that's because I was working with Alexis, and I felt like she did the most of it. bad, but I was like, but it was like, I don't know what to do because it's not like I can help Alexis edit this, but like Alexis ended up doing the most of it. But like every other time I've had like a video project of some sort in high school, it's like, it's kind of like not even like I feel like for different kinds of projects that aren't video related, it's like, okay, who wants to do this and who wants to do that? Whenever it's a video project, it's kind of like, Gabby, you're going to do this, right? Like there was one project this year, I'm not going to call it the teacher of the class or anything, where it honestly felt slightly, the teacher was slightly like auctioning me off to the class. Like, who wants Gabby? And they were all like, I do. It was kind of like, okay. So it was like before like the groups were even like picked, it was like already assumed that I would be handling like the brunt of the work, which was just, it was like, it was frustrating, but also funny at the same time, because it was like the groups were just like sort of like counting off, but there was an odd number in the class and like I was the last person. So it was like all the groups were even, except whatever group I went in would have like one more person or whatever. And it was like, okay, so who wants Gabby? And it was kind of like, I want Gabby. And everyone was like,
Yeah, I guess in the same way, but at the same time, it's like, I wouldn't want any other way, because like I said, I don't really trust anybody else doing the master edit of our, I said, like my A push projects last year, our final video ended up being like 14 minutes or something like that. And like, as much of a pain as it was, I really wouldn't want to put that on anyone else, because at the same time, I know,
yeah.
Like I don't, again, like it's gonna sound weird, but like I don't really trust anyone else.
I mean, that's the thing for me. It's trust, but then also it's like I wouldn't want to give the work to someone else, because I know what may take me an hour or 2 hours would take someone without my PCTV experience like 6 hours. Yeah. Like I'm not gonna make someone else do 6 hours of work because I don't want to do 1 or 2. It's just kind of like sometimes I'm like, I wish someone would ask instead of just assume.
For Chinese, we have video projects a lot, and unless I'm working with Lori, because I trust Lori, like she's my Ryan, in group projects for Chinese specifically. Unless I'm working with Lori, I tell the group, I'm like, I will shoot and edit this whole thing, and I'll do graphics, I'll make it look cute, but I'm not gonna write the majority of the script if I'm doing all that with no help. And so it's a give and take. Like I'm not gonna, because I feel like whenever we don't get to choose our own groups, I end up being in a group where I do all the work. And so I make it clear that I'm not doing all the work. I'll do this work, but I'm not going to do that work too if I'm doing all this work. Yeah. I think that's the joy of being in PCTV, is we get to shoot the video and edit it, but we don't have to write the script for group projects.
So I think... Oh, sorry, Chase. Did you want to add something?
Yeah, because we got very caught up on the class project side thing, but I do want to come back, even just briefly, to the cross-department thing we were talking about, because I actually have had some experience with that. So as part of TSA are actually some film events. There are 2 of them. There's a competition one, digital video production, where you make a film beforehand and submit it. I've never been involved with that. Again, not because I don't have the skills, but because like I already get a kick out of that doing PCTV. If I'm submitting stuff for TSA, I'd rather be, TSA-oriented stuff. And then on-site, there is on-demand video, which is just like STN Junior. You get a prompt, you get, I think, 3 props and 1 line of dialogue, and you have 48 hours to produce a 60-second short film with the stuff they gave you. And it was really interesting because we've done it for years, and like I haven't been in it because I've mostly been busy with other things. And I joined at States last year as an actor, actually. I know, me on camera. Very, very bizarre. I literally did it because there's one scene in which the dude ran. And I'm like, I can run, therefore I must be the actor. And then I got yelled at because I was running too fast. The cameraman couldn't keep up. We had to redo that take like 10 times. And then at Nationals, I actually ended up taking over as the lead. And I know I mentioned this to TSA. Our chapter advisor was sick this year at Nationals. So when I pulled the team together, I literally said, I'm like, look, I'm doing this for fun because I have nothing else to do. Do not expect to do well at all. We ended up having like a really good team together. We ended up placing 4th out of like 100 and something entries, which is like really cool. But then at States this year, because of that, we had a lot of people join who didn't really have any business being there. I think some people didn't really understand the structure of how like time sensitive material like that worked. And I don't know how it works in STN because I've never gone to STN because I've always been in TSA, which basically takes me out of commission for about 2 weeks. If you guys want to talk about maybe how it works in STN, but like at States this year, we had like 10 people trying to write the script and it just wasn't working. And there were like 2 or 3 people there who had legitimate experience who just kept getting pushed aside, which really, like I said, I ended up like quitting like at States because I was just like so fed up. And they ended up doing well. They placed second at States, but that's the kind of thing that like I wish they hadn't, because the way in which they ran it, at least to me, having been through broadcast, been in like a time sensitive environment, just felt totally wrong and like really inefficient.
Yeah.
So I think at this point we've kind of gone through most of the broadcast story, how you guys got started, where the first year sort of went, and how it's structured, how it was different in middle school to high school, how it interacted with other departments. So the question now is, where do you see it going in the future? Do you think that the programs that you've been involved in like have a certain thing that needs to change or that will change, or where do you sort of see that going?
I mean, at least like talking for myself, I mean, I'm a graduated senior, so at least within the PCTV itself, I will no longer be involved, which is really super sad to me because it's been so many years, and like I love my teachers so much, I love the program so much, and like it's really sad for me that like I'm done with that. But for me, at least, I'm not done with journalism because I'm going into college next year. I'm a journalism major is my plan, and I plan on being involved in broadcast and print, at least through college. Then from there, I don't know which one I'm going to sort of start focusing on more, because prior to over the summer, where I did a journalism summer program for 5 weeks, I always focused on broadcast for the most part. But then over the summer, I had more of an exposure to print journalism. And then this year, acting as co-chief copy editor of the yearbook was definitely an experience that I loved, being able to write more, because I've always loved writing, whether it's been the scripts in PCTV or writing outside. So, I mean, for me personally, going in the future, I plan on continuing in broadcast, even though I know the environment will be very different because it won't be the same environment I've been in for the last 7 years. It'll be like working my way up again, I guess. Like in 6th grade, I started at the bottom. By 8th grade, I worked my way up. Freshman year, I started at the bottom. By now, like I've worked my way up, and now it's like next year, I'm gonna go into the studio at Northwestern and be like, I don't know, running the prompter again, like back to the bottom. But I plan on continuing it and just seeing where it takes me from there.
Yeah. I am currently double majoring with journalism as one of my majors, and it's called CLEG. It's Communications Law, Economics, and Government. It's an interdisciplinary major, and so I might end up minoring in journalism if that becomes too much work, because CLEG's already a pretty intensive major. But I do plan on doing my school's news program, but I cannot stand print media. That's not an option for me. I can't do it. It's not interactive enough. But for PCTV, I think next year they're going to keep working on being more interactive with the audience, because that's really what our main goal was this year, I think. Like, if we had a goal, it was to be more interactive. What I'm really sad about is I never got to see the backdrop go up, like the new one. That was my external project for PCTV this year, and I'm really sad I never got to see it go, because we have it. We ordered it. It came in, but we never got to hang it up, and that makes me really sad. So next year, I'll be watching to see it.
Yeah, like I said, at least for me personally, obviously, I still got another year of high school left, but I know like this is just a passion project for me. I don't want to go into journalism or media production, but it's a skill I always want to have. Like, I always want to be the kind of person who, like, oh great, I have this thing. I don't have to pay, like, this is kind of weird, but like I might like edit my own like wedding photo montage, so I don't have to pay someone like $1,000 to do that for me. It's just kind of a good skill to have, like I said, especially in these group projects and all these other things, because you're always going to need, and if I ever do anything and want to document it, obviously having, knowing how to do that is a really powerful tool, regardless of kind of what I want to keep going in the future. If I want to document a project or tell my life story or interview people, or whatever it is. And at least for the program, I think it's going to keep going strong. It's been, I said, it's been a big program for a while, and I think, we're losing a lot of seniors, but I think everyone else is sticking around. At least I haven't heard anyone who's taking off from period 2. And I think we're going to gain. I don't know who we're gaining, other than Gabby's brother. But I think I hope we gain some good people. I think we will. We gain some good people this year, and I think we're going to keep seeing that passion alive. And also, I think one of the things on our agenda is to kind of branch out a little bit. I know we really want to get a bit better into social media next year. Like, we played around with it this year, and sometimes it worked really well, and sometimes not so much. We're just like, oh crap, we got to do the social media thing. Somebody go do the social media thing. But I think, and then there's other creative things too, like an opportunity which I talked about here, that I got this year that was really, really cool, was for homecoming. We do custom Snapchat filters each year, and I got to design those this year. So that was like a really cool project for me to do during homecoming week, which is a hectic week in and of itself. I also had to edit a piece together and stayed on campus for like 3 hours of school one day, running back and forth between shooting stuff and also playing in an esports tournament at the same time. But my hope is, I kind of want to do that again, and I want to keep finding, cool ways to integrate, the class with everything else. So I think there are, like I said, there's a lot of cool ways we can stay, interactive with the community and kind of keep pushing, what we do and how we do it.
So,
I mean, at least, okay, I'm sorry. I wanted to say that, like, because I know Chase was saying about how, like, he knows, like, even though he doesn't plan on going into this, the skills he learned, like, he can produce his own videos for whatever it is. I think the skills also, if you don't end up doing any kind of video production in career or even just for fun passion projects, are incredibly, like, applicable to all sorts of different things. Because, like Alexis and I were saying earlier, like, we've definitely both gained confidence in, like, talking to people. And I think also, like, knowing how to ask questions and not being afraid to ask questions is one thing that I've definitely, like, learned through doing this that was applicable, at least for me in the classroom. Like, I feel like being able to ask interview questions made me more comfortable asking questions in class, or like, I feel like in the future job interviews, like, I won't be scared of asking questions because I know the only way to get the information you want is through asking questions. And even just being able to, like Alexis was saying, go places you've never been and talk to random people, which to a lot of people seems like a daunting task, and it is a daunting task even for me now. Sometimes it can be like a little anxious of like, is this the right place? Like, who am I supposed to be talking to here? But it's just getting comfortable with that, I feel like, is something that's just useful in everyday life.
So I think that now that we've kind of looked at the whole story from the start to like where we are now and where we might be going in the future, I think it's always interesting at the end of these to kind of look back at like the past hour that we've been talking and see, is there, for example, somebody that you want to shout out for having been really influencing you as you worked your way up? I mean, we've talked about a few names, or is there somebody right now that you think might be really impactful in the future that you want to give a shout out to as well, or even just something that you think isn't said enough regarding everything that we've said that you want to just put out there?
I mean, I know I kind of said it already, but like, Miss Rashbaum, Miss Porter, Mr. Burgess, like Mr. Vosge, Mr. Svensson, all of the teachers that I've had for PCNN and PCTV, like, I love them all so much. And like, they all made such an impact on me, whether it was one of the teachers that like I worked with constantly or one of the teachers that I only worked with in middle school or like haven't worked with a ton. Like, they've all made such an impact. And it's weird to me that like, I'm never going to have like, be able to really work with them again. Like, I know for me, like, definitely, like, I plan on keeping in touch with Miss Porter, Miss Rashbaum, Mr. Burgess. Like, I know whatever the first piece that I produce in college is, I'll be sending them the link and telling them to watch it, waiting for their feedback and their advice. But it's just, I don't know, they've definitely been a major part of that whole journey.
I mean, frankly, it's hard for me to single someone out, but I have to honestly say, like, all the period too. Well, maybe not all of it, but the vast majority of period 2. Period 2 when they're all on their good days, let's just say. Because, like I said, as much as I do have my own personal stipulations with some people in that class, I think at the end of the day, everyone's head is in the right place, everyone's heart is in that right place. everyone is there because they want to be. Nobody forces you to join period 2. You're invited. Like Alexis said, there are many people who choose to decline because it's just not their thing. But I think everyone in that class, like I said, has a passion for what they do, regardless of if that is journalism or some other type of media production or kind of whatever else that is they're into, and you can really see that by the way they behave, and the way they conduct themselves, the way that it's hard to find a group of people who are willing to drag their bus to school at 7 a.m. On a morning to go finish up like somebody else's piece because they were sick or whatever, or stick around until like 11 p.m. at night to go film a football game or whatever it is. It takes a certain amount of dedication, and I think a lot of people there really have all of that.
Yeah, I think Miss Porter has probably like been the most intensive with me. Like there was a night my computer ran out of storage while I was exporting, and she sat with me until like 1 a.m. just trying to figure out how I could get some storage off my computer, like enough to export this piece that was due the next day. And like Mr. Burgess has come to so many shoots with me just in his free time because he genuinely wants to make sure that they can be the best that they can be, and he wants me to like feel safe with them. And like just the teachers at PCTV are just incredible people. Like all of them. Miss Rashbaum is an incredible writer. Like she helps me all the time write scripts because sometimes I get writer's block and have no idea what I want to say. Like they're all just incredible people, and like all of them have helped me improve my skills in every way possible.
All right. Well, I think that with that, we've kind of reached the conclusion. Do you guys have any sort of closing thoughts or comments or any other shout outs or anything else you want to say? I guess that's mostly it then. Thank you guys for coming. I've had a great time.
Thank you for having us, Gabe.
Thanks, Gabe.